Hi Booktopia, it's Megan Hess. I'm an author and an illustrator. And today we're going to take a look at some of my favourite illustrations from my books from over the years. Okay, so the first book is Claris Dazzling Diamond Egg, and this is Claris's new picture book. And the illustration that I've chosen from this is her fashion lineup. And this is something that has become very iconic in all of my Claris books. It's Claris at some point in the adventure choosing which outfit she's going to wear. And whenever I do book signings with kids everywhere, they always tell me this is their favourite page. It'll be a collection of looks that go with whatever the story is. She might be in something sort of fluffy and Valentino through to something Chanel, a little bit of vintage Dior in leopard print. It's a really fun illustration to always draw in the Claris books. And so this being her very latest one, I'm very attached to it. Okay, the next book is my new fashion biography on the life of Louis Vuitton. I loved illustrating this book, and there were two illustrations that I particularly loved. This one, which is the first one, which is an illustration of a Louis Vuitton trunk that is transformed into a bed. And one of the things that I love about Louis Vuitton is the fact that they do have these amazing trunks, and these trunks are not just trunks. They transform into desks, beds, dressing tables, all these vases, all these amazing different things. And so I loved diving into that world, and I loved illustrating this particular bed. And I just wanted to be this woman sitting in a Louis Vuitton dress with a glass of champagne with her fold-out bed. And then the second illustration from my Louis Vuitton book is this illustration of the Titanic, sort of mid-sinking. And I loved creating this illustration because it's very different to what I normally create. Most of my illustrations are very light and bright and pretty, and I love the fact that the Louis Vuitton luggage is rumoured to be the only luggage that didn't sink when the Titanic sank. So that's a really key point in the book and something really interesting. And so this was challenging to draw, which is why I love it, because it was difficult to draw the boat sinking, and also I had to really keep to the colour palette of the book, which doesn't include blue. And this is an ocean shot. So I'm really happy with how it came together. It's all the sort of charcoals and the browns and the sort of moody pink sky really, I think, captured that moment with the luggage. So that's why I love that one. Okay, the next book is Abigail Fig, The Secret Agent Pig. This is one of Claris's friends from the world of Claris, and I loved illustrating this book because this to me was just, I laughed the entire way through illustrating this book, because essentially Abigail lives with these two mean, horrible other pigs, and illustrating the horrible other pigs and the sort of trouble that they get into was really, really fun to illustrate. And Abigail is someone who's curious, and she's very optimistic, and I always say she's who I really want to be when I grow up. She's someone that's really a great character, and so there were many things within this book that were just really, really fun to draw. The other illustration from this book is, after all her epic spy work and finally moving on from these two other horrible pigs, she gets her own, well, I drew her own sort of spy secret location. And this was so much fun to illustrate, because everything that I loved as a kid with spy movies and things that I imagine an FBI, CIA pig would have with their screens and their security, checking over what's happening with intel all over the world. She's got her safe, and she's even got a button press for intel. It was just the perfect place to end the story. And I thought kids would have a lot of fun finding different clues and things within this illustration. The next book is another Claris picture book, Magnificent Mess. And this story is later in the series from the Claris picture books. And what I love about this particular illustration is that it depicts Claris finally having her new atelier location. She worked from her mouse hole in the very beginning, but then she worked her way up to a fabulous secret little spot in the very top of the Eiffel Tower, which I think is extremely cool. And in this particular illustration, early on in the story, all of her friends want her to make outfits for them because that's what she does. And then a little bug comes along, and this little bug wants an outfit. But because Claris doesn't have a lot of space, she's trying to sort of measure her up on the windowsill, and the bug blows off the windowsill. And I really wanted you to think the bug had gone, that the worst had possibly happened to the bug, so that when we get to the very end of the story, the doorbell rings and there she is. She survived and she's ready to have her dress made. So this is Claris in this final right-hand side of the illustration, stitching her a couture dress, and the little bug is really happy. And this is just one of my favorite illustrations because it's where Claris has also evolved as a character to her space and creating. Okay, the next book is Stella, the Meerkat Burglar. I love Stella, and Stella had been a character in the Claris books, just sort of like one of her background friends for many stories. But I had always pictured that Stella had a bigger life than just a friend in the background. This is one of the illustrations from this book, and this is of the Louvre. When I first pictured Stella as a character, I pictured that she had a secret tunnel to the Louvre. And I didn't know anything more about what her story would be, but I thought she would be a meerkat who is different to Claris in that she doesn't wear frilly, fluffy outfits. She's more of a pantsuit, a cool Gucci tie, that kind of a vibe. And she was someone that loved art and inspiration. And so she finds herself through a secret tunnel into the Louvre. And this illustration I love because it shows that she's got this new home in the Louvre, and every night when everything is shut, she goes and she sits and watches all the art. And she's so tiny, and she realizes at some point in the book that even though she can look at all this art in the Louvre and it's amazing, she really just wants a friend. The next book is my Coco Chanel. This book is one that I loved illustrating, and this is one of my favorite illustrations in the book. And it's kind of a very simple illustration compared to a lot of my other work, but this means a lot to me because when I was thinking about illustrating her early life in the book and knowing that she was a little orphan who essentially came from nothing, she had impeccable taste and she was very determined, and it just still to this day inspires me that she was a tiny little girl that turned into a titan in fashion, and she was relentless in keeping to her sense of style, what she believed in. And I felt like this illustration of her closing her eyes, which to me depicts, despite everything, I will make it. And the next illustration from this same book is more, if that was at the beginning of the book, this is kind of the end of the book, where we see the world that Coco Chanel left after she passed. And I find it fascinating that she passed away so long ago, and yet Chanel as a brand and the DNA and all the things that Coco created in the very beginning has never been lost. And it's still the same things that people love about it. And so this was a very detailed scene, completely opposite to the previous one. This took a long time to draw, just getting the architecture correct, having a great mixture of different people in the background, and just really showing the world of Chanel today. Okay, the next book is in my Young Queens collection, and this one's called The Glimmering Ghost. And as a kid who loved ghost stories, I can't believe it took me this long to actually write one. This illustration I love because this is the illustration that I first, when I was illustrating the book, cracked what the ghost would look like. Because in my mind, I'm thinking it's a ghost, she's transparent. But then until you actually go to illustrate that, it was a bit trickier than I pictured. So when I was working on the illustration, I created the entire scene where you see our main character and her cat, and I drew the ghost completely non-transparent, a solid illustration of the ghost, and then I spent a long time playing with how do I make her transparent? How ghostly should she be? And she's also actually a great character in the book, so I wanted her to not look scary. I wanted her to look very angelic, and so I'm really proud of how this finally came together, and I hope kids feel like this is a perfect ghost when they see the story. Okay, the next book is my Ollie and Basil, The Dashing Frogs of Travel. These are my frogs that are they're friends of Claris, and they're very prominent in all the Claris books. And this, in their story, is my favorite illustration. Essentially, the two frogs work separately, and then they figure out that they're actually much stronger together. And when they finally get together and realize that they're both really great at making things, especially transportation, I decided that they deserved the ultimate headquarters that would be secret. And I loved, as a kid, when you would see secret sort of cuts, like sections into walls, and you could see what was really happening behind a tree or in a rock. And so I pictured that they had this secret headquarters they've got their own jet, there's a rocket in there, multiple cars. It's kind of hilarious. A boat. I just wanted this to be a really fun picture that kids could stare at and imagine moving through all the different levels. And then finally, when the frogs want to escape, they can zip out this direction in a car, they can go through the water, through this little hole in the rock, or they can fly away in their chopper, which I think is very cool. So the next book is Claris, Holiday Heist. This is Claris's first Christmas story, and of all the Claris stories, it might be my favorite. And when I was illustrating this book, I often, because I'm a visual person and I'm thinking about a story, I will often just see it visually without even any words. And when I thought about Claris having a Christmas story, I pictured New York at Christmas, because I love New York at Christmas, and something different from Paris. And I just, without even having a story, I pictured this scene. And it was in the middle of Times Square, it's snowing, and Claris and Monsieur are holding onto the top of a taxi flying through Times Square. And I didn't know why or what they would be doing, but I just kept seeing it. I kept picturing it. And so then when I nutted out the story and pictured that a heist, who's going to do the heist? It's going to be a cat, and they're going to be on the chase for him. It's going to be all through New York at Christmas time, which will be really fun. And so, when you create the books, so much happens before I even illustrate anything, which is writing the story, rewriting the story, and all the different things that come together. And when I finally got to the day that I was illustrating this, it was embedded in my memory, and I still really love it as a scene. Okay, and the next book is Claris, The Secret Crown. And this story is set in London, and I wanted to set one of Claris's stories in London for quite a while. Colour scheme, every Claris book has a colour scheme, which is the predominant colour. So for this one, because she's purple on the cover, purple and lilacs were the colours throughout this book. And this illustration is one that feels very special to me. This was about book 7 or 8. And to me, Monsieur the cat, who's her main sidekick, best friend in all of the books, he is someone that she just loves more than anything else. And their friendship is something that has been really beautiful to illustrate from the very start of the books right through to the books that I'm working on now. And this story was very much about him searching for other cats like him that were British short-hair cats, and her helping him find who his people were, or his cats are. And eventually when he does find them, they don't want Claris to join or come in. And so he decides he doesn't actually need these short-hair cats because he's actually got Claris. And so he gives up on that idea, and they just decide to kind of watch the sunset and look out to the beautiful London skyline. And I loved that they were just in silhouette, which is something that I've never illustrated before. I just liked that you could see them there leaning on each other and showing that the friendship they have means more than anything else in the world. And the next book is my Christian Dior book. And I love Dior, and I love everything that Christian Dior created. And this illustration from the book depicts, you can see Dior in the background, and in the foreground are 3 of his sort of key fashion looks that he created called the New Look. And there was something magical about Paris and about him at the time that he created them. And there'd been such a depression with the war, and there was something magical when Dior brought a little bit of happiness into the world with this new style that he created under his own name. So I just really love this illustration. And finally, The last book to show is The Velvet Messenger from my Young Queens collection. And this illustration from this book, I think, is my favorite illustration from all of my books. Again, one that when I pictured the story, but I hadn't even written anything, I pictured this scene. And there's something about this illustration that just felt magical when I was drawing it, and I still feel it when I look at it. And maybe it's because I think I'd always wanted to illustrate kind of an evil castle, which is where the evil queen lived. And I loved the main character in this book, her strength and the fact that she's calm and she needs to make a decision. And in this book, there's this castle is so high in the sky, and she's run to escape from the evil queen. And there's been a bird in the story that we don't know whether the bird is good or is the bird bad. And the bridge is broken, and just across from the bridge is the tiniest little illustration of the bird. And they stand there, and she needs to decide, does she jump or does she run back inside the castle and face the queen? You need to read the book to find out what happens. But this illustration was just one of those beautiful moments where when I illustrated it, I felt like all the noise of the world just went silent, and I was just literally in this snowy land and in this scene. Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to get my new books on Booktopia.